Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorn.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet, all Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto out there.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. I'm your host, Alex Thorn, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy. Bitcoin not zero, and we have a great episode for you today. Alex Leishman, CEO, CTO, and founder of River Financial, river.com, a Bitcoin-only brokerage. He's our guest. We're going to talk with Alex at length about Bitcoin development and how changes are made to Bitcoin, what the future of scaling looks like, and what they have going on at River, what they see in the Bitcoin trading and investing world from their unique vantage point as one of the biggest Bitcoin-only brokerages, also the biggest Lightning node. They have unparalleled insight into the use of the Lightning Network. We'll also talk with Binmet Abibi, our friend from Galaxy Trading, as always, about markets and macro. Before we get to all of that, I need to remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Man, this is a fun episode, so let's just hop right into it. Let's go now to our friend Binmet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, Binmet, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're on a bit of a run right now. Obviously, the Bitcoin conference is coming up next week. Bitcoin was trading at about 65,000 as we record this, which is up fairly decent amount off those lows, maybe up $10,000 off the lows. What's driving that in your mind?
Yeah, so I think it's really been a function of Trump starting to lead and get a more aggressive lead post the shooting announcement, and the fact that he's pro Bitcoin, and so the market over the weekend essentially repriced Bitcoin materially higher because it's pretty clear that Bitcoin is an election issue, and that Trump is most likely going to get elected now, and of the universe of Republican winning election trades, Bitcoin at that point in time offered, very attractive risk reward because it had sold off so much. And, it's a pretty liquid way of expressing the Trump thesis in theory. And so the market really latched onto that. And then, there was an existing short base that got squeezed as a function of that, and some folks that were short some optionality as well that got squeezed. And so, you basically had fresh longs being put on into a market that was decently shorted, that caused some short liquidations. And then on top of that, you've had pretty dramatic ETF inflows over the past couple of sessions. I think IBIT, the figures reported yesterday were an inflow of $229 million. And so, you're starting to see continued uptick in Bitcoin ETF kind of ads. In addition, you had Larry Fink literally on TV Monday morning on Squawk Box touting Bitcoin and how it is a great portfolio diversifier, digital gold. And what struck me the most was kind of the fact that he spoke about Bitcoin as kind of a hedge to let's just say broader societal concerns, and rampant fiscal abroad, and domestically in a way. And so, it's so elevating to see the CEO of a $8 trillion asset management company truly believe in kind of the ethos of crypto and Bitcoin primarily. He did acknowledge some of the concerns around it, but at this point, we've said this phrase a lot, but it is an asset class that has been institutionalized. And when it's one of the few things that Larry Fink talks about when he's on Squawk Box in the morning, I think that tells you all you need to know about where this asset class stands in the context of others. It's right there with them. And so, I think when you kind of put together all of these things and you start thinking about, an SEC that doesn't have Gensler, a vice presidential candidate that actually owns Bitcoin and is interested in crypto legislation. When you couple this with the fact that you have, Donald Trump engaging in a speaking appearance at Bitcoin Nashville, all of these things, start to form a very constructive picture for Bitcoin domestically. And then on top of that, I view, the fact that the German government is done selling as a constructive development. There's less supply coming into the market on a go forward basis. In addition, that there's genuine chatter about China allowing mainland citizens to potentially, buy Bitcoin. Obviously it'd be in kind of a closed construct, similar to what you see in Korea, Japan, India. But nonetheless, still a positive development. And so, there are just so many things that are kind of, creating such a powerful narrative around Bitcoin. And the regulatory front, like, even today you had Hester Pierce comment about how there is a path forward to kind of revisiting in-kind creates and redemptions of the ETF products as well. And so there's just so much that's good happening, and that's what you're seeing reflected in Bitcoin. And yeah, if you're not long, you're short. Like that's kind of what, where it is at right now.
It's definitely going to get more exciting. I mean, I think in addition to the former president appearing at the Bitcoin 2024 conference in Nashville, just 2 weeks to the day from the failed assassination attempt, that's obviously humongous. But I can tell you from talking with the folks at Bitcoin Magazine, they're anticipating a lot of other interesting announcements at that conference. So, and then by the way, it's going to be really interesting because next week we anticipate that the ETH ETFs will launch. Maybe, I don't know, I think Tuesday is the day most are expecting. Maybe it's Wednesday. And so you're going to have these ETFs go up head to head, the ETFs going up head to head against the Bitcoin conference and all the stuff that entails. It's going to be a very interesting week for ETH BTC. What do you think on that, by the way?
I think Bitcoin is going to outperform no matter what, in an up environment or a down environment. I view the Ethereum ETF approval as a supply event because you'll have folks that have been stuck in ETH paying exorbitant fees, in addition to not earning staking yields, and also not having the utility of having liquid ETH to yield farm, etc. And so, my inclination is that there's going to be a lot of redemptions that are going to be met with, some genuine buying demand, but not enough to kind of outweigh the supply dynamics that are, associated with this ETH product unlocking. In addition, like it's one of those things where, like, I don't have many compelling arguments as to why somebody should prefer an ETH ETF product over owning ETH, like in any other way, basically. The yield dynamics, the lack of a management fee, like it at least with Bitcoin, there's no native yield on Bitcoin, and so you're not foregoing anything by going into the ETF, and you might get some margin benefits of, for going into it. And so there's a reasonable argument to be made that you should convert some of your Bitcoin balances to the Bitcoin ETFs, but with ETH you don't have that argument. And so I'm a little bit more cautious around the ETH ETF. In addition, this industry does have quite the reputation of being a buy the rumor, sell the news kind of market, and that's what you've seen with basically every other ETF launch that we've had in the history of crypto. The original Bitcoin futures ETF was a buy the rumor, sell the news event. The actual Bitcoin ETF launch was, again, buy the rumor, sell the news event, just tactically on the day of the launch. And the Ethereum futures ETF, same thing. Day was launching, futures spike on Sunday open, and you're quickly heading lower after,
Yep.
kind of accelerating higher. And so I do think that, rallies are probably meant to be faded going into this launch event. But ultimately, you've got, Donald Trump, who's most likely going to be the leader of the free world, speaking at Bitcoin Nashville,
Yeah.
I believe that's on the 27th of July. And
on Saturday. Yeah.
He is, you really don't know what he's going to say. You don't know what, kind of the other participants are going to say as well. And, there's a lot of single issue voters that are focused on crypto. And so, I think this is, there's the potential for some meaningful surprises, I think. And so, I continue to think that Bitcoin is probably the thing that you want to own on a relative basis.
Okay, and let's go to macro real quick before we wrap here. I've seen some dovish commentary. What's been happening in the rates markets? What's going on?
It's the data has turned. It started to turn in, some of the employment figures, but most importantly in the price figures as well. And you're starting to see basically the bottom 40% of the economy, start to meaningfully struggle. I'll give you an interesting data point, just to highlight some of this. Retail sales this week came out and they came in higher than expected, but they came in higher than expected because of a reasonably large kind of seasonal adjustment factor. When you kind of take away some of the seasonality adjustments, the figures are actually not good. I think they represent down 5% in terms of retail sales on a not seasonally adjusted basis. In addition, when you kind of look at the credit card data that you've gotten for the month of June, at least one report that I saw from a large bulge bracket bank highlighted that spending was down in almost every single category in a meaningful way, and you're starting to see credit card write-offs and reserves for loan losses kind of pick up in the credit card industry, and so I'm starting to think that you're basically at the point where the Fed is going to realize that they are behind the curve in terms of cutting interest rates, and that they probably need to go quicker than they had originally anticipated. So I think you're still meant to be long front end interest rates. I think there's a decent chance that folks start to talk about 50 basis point cuts pretty soon. You haven't had much you don't have much in the way of data this week, but I do think that you just got to keep paying attention to the data. There's some other interesting dynamics with respect to who Trump is going to pick for Fed chair, if he's going to get rid of Powell, and who he would potentially replace him with, who Treasury Secretary is going to be. And so on a go forward basis, it's going to be really important to kind of assess what Trump is thinking with respect to monetary policy. And some of the headlines we've had over the past 48 hours, there's a little bit of kind of mixed signals out of it. One of the headlines I saw from Tuesday, in this, I think it was a Bloomberg or FT interview, was that he basically said Powell shouldn't cut interest rates before the election. And so that's kind of a big statement. He also, I think, is potentially considering Jamie Dimon for Secretary of Treasury, and obviously Jamie Dimon is not pro Bitcoin, and so there's a lot of things that.
Well, actually, I wanted to say, while we're recording, BIMNet, a Forbes story has come out saying that Donald Trump claims that Jamie Dimon has changed his tune on Bitcoin, which listeners to this podcast will know we've got
really.
that great. Yeah, I haven't confirmed this, but it's a Forbes story. I'm going to put in the chat in a minute.
Forbes is reporting
so
that. Wow.
We'll have to see.
What did Jamie Dimon call Bitcoin?
He said Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically. All the Bitcoin's going to be erased. That's our listeners will know that's a quote from Jamie Dimon in there. Yeah, he called it a Ponzi scheme. He made fun of his own daughter for owning Bitcoin at one point publicly. So. Look, let's wrap it there. There's a lot going on, and we will catch up with you next week, Bimnet. Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading, as always, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go now to our guest, Alex Leishman, CEO, CTO, and founder of River. Welcome to Galaxy Brains, Alex. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me on.
I've been a longtime user of River. I just right up front have to disclose that. Big fan of your company and your product. What is River? And just why don't we start there? Tell the audience what River does.
In short, River makes it really easy to buy, sell, use, and do anything you would want with Bitcoin in the United States.
Yep. And U.S. only today, right?
Yes.
You have international plans?
We're evaluating international, probably on the high net worth side.
Yep.
International consumer is still a TBD.
Yeah. I mean, it's a giant global regulatory patchwork of who knows what. But so it's a Bitcoin brokerage. You don't service other coins. You don't have stable coins or anything like that, right?
Correct. Bitcoin only.
Yeah. But you have, one of the things I like about River is that you have a bunch of Bitcoin products that you don't see. Like what are, I mean, you said buy, sell, use, but drill in a little bit for me.
Yeah. So we obsess a lot about trying to perfect the user experience around Bitcoin. And historically, Bitcoin has had a lot of friction to especially if you're transacting with it or sending it somewhere. So we have some interesting things that we've built. One of them is called River Link. It allows you to send Bitcoin to somebody by just texting them a link.
Yep.
Historically, you had to sort of coordinate with somebody if you wanted to send them Bitcoin, ask them, do you want it on chain? Do you want Lightning? Send me your address. There was all this back and forth. And we were like, can we just delete all of that? And in your River account, you can just click send as a link, enter the amount, creates a link, you send it to a friend, and they can claim the Bitcoin however they want, whether they have a River account or not. And it deletes that interaction to make sending Bitcoin a little bit more pleasant. And so we try to really deeply explore sort of the flows that people go through and to buy, sell, and use Bitcoin and try to level it up. Yeah,
you also have a Lightning integration that works really well. I've used as like an on and on ramp in and out of Lightning rather than, especially if I'm not using my own Lightning node, right? Rather than doing channel management, I can send and receive Lightning to myself using, right, basically providing myself Lightning liquidity using River as an on and off ramp, which I found incredibly useful.
Yeah, you can just deposit on Lightning to your River account. You just get credited your account.
Right.
Balance goes up. You can send that out on chain. You can sell it. You can do whatever.
It's a very important node, like, no pun intended, on that network for me. And so, like, I don't know how when did you guys find? It used to be called something else.
Yeah.
I recall, I think maybe in 2019 meeting you in San Francisco at that Bitcoin conference, and it was called Alto Financial.
Yes.
When did you change the name?
Yeah, we were originally called Alto Financial, and then due to some trademark kerfuffle, we decided to change our name, and it was really a blessing in disguise. Our domain actually used to be alto.financial, and I always kind of was annoyed we didn't have a .com, and so we just used that as an opportunity to rebrand, and saw that river.com was actually available. It was owned by a lawyer who had owned it since like 1994 and was ready to sell it, and we snagged it up. And
nice.
Been that ever since.
Is that how you chose the name River to rebrand to, because you got the great domain?
Yeah, so we actually started with the domain problem, and we said we want a good .com.
Yep.
And worked with a domain broker to go through what was on the market and what sort of fit the vibe we were going for. And when I saw that, I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
I like that. And I remember at the time you were building or one of your, I mean, that makes sense. One of the first things you guys built was custody. You guys do your own custody. I mean, River doesn't outsource custody to some third party.
Correct.
Right? When you have Bitcoin at River. Why was that important? I mean, that must have been harder, I think, right? Like slower time to market if you build everything yourself. But why was that important to you?
Yeah. The slower time to market is especially because it's not that building it necessarily takes a long time. It's in order to custody assets, you need licenses, and that's really where the work is. But it was very important to us because the whole ethos behind the company was to do Bitcoin and to do it right, and to build the most trusted Bitcoin brand in the United States. And we fundamentally can't do that if we're outsourcing the most important part of the business. I wanted to be able to 100% with 100% certainty tell our clients that their Bitcoin is safe. And you just can't really do that if you outsource it. Not your keys, not your coins, applies to businesses as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you are a Bitcoin developer too, right? You used to, was it the SF Bit Devs that you used to be a very active participant, or even
I ran it.
You ran it,
Yeah,
so
for years.
Yeah, But now you're CEO. I mean, how does being a software developer, a Bitcoin developer, what is it like being a manager and a CTO? I mean, or maybe in another way of asking this actually before we get there is what were you software developing before Bitcoin? Like, are you a Silicon Valley tech developer guy with backgrounds in whichever companies?
So
I genuinely don't know, to be clear. It's not a leading question.
No, yeah. So it's all good questions. So I've been working in the Bitcoin space as a software engineer for more or less 10 or 11 years. I first worked at a startup called MyCoin. It was like the Coinbase for Taiwan.
Oh, wow.
And they were based in Palo Alto. And I was doing a lot of web development, sort of web application development, and eventually ended up going back to grad school. I did my master's in computer science at Stanford. I helped TA the first Bitcoin class there.
Wow.
With Professor Dan Benet.
Yep.
In the computer science department in 2015, and then sort of had a few stints elsewhere. I did one sort of big tech job. I worked at Airbnb on the security team for a bit, and so my background is sort of kind of general software development, security. I've done a little bit of core development, but nothing super involved.
Right.
And yeah, so my background is really sort of full stack, and with a focus on security and cryptography.
Makes sense. And then so what's the difference between being a full stack developer and being a CEO of a startup?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I've really learned a lot as a founder and a CEO is when you're a developer, your bias is to always start with sort of the solutions which is like writing code. But as a CEO, you don't start with implementing anything. You start from a business problem, and you focus a lot on the market and the strategy. And I've learned to sort of like bias heavily towards that, and then work backwards to the tech solutions. And so that's definitely been sort of a fun adjustment. I actually like that. But nonetheless, understanding tech, understanding software development, I think it has allowed us to operate very efficiently and lean, because I understand what actually needs to get built and how to prevent the bloat that I think plagues a lot of tech companies.
You guys have also done a bunch of really good research. Tell me about some of the things that you have. First of all, you also have a great online like education portal. I think River Learn, really good for like a whole variety of, but not just terminology, but even like things like the block size wars and all these things. But you guys did, because you run such a connected Lightning node, and also at this point for a while, you put out great research on Lightning. What did you guys find in that research? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, so we've been running Lightning since 2019, actually. So since we started the company, we've been running Lightning nodes, and so because of that, like you said, we have some of the largest nodes and well-connected nodes in the network. We process a lot of transactions for some very important players. We're the Lightning backend for the Chivo wallet in El Salvador, and because of that, these flows, we have a lot of interesting data. And so our last report came out almost a year ago, and it highlights a lot of the interesting trends that we saw around, especially the growth in the transaction numbers of the Lightning Network. We saw that the Lightning Network grew, sort of like 10 to 20x over about a 2-year period in terms of volume and number of transactions at a lower bound. We're hopefully we're going to do another report this year.
Yeah.
So we'll see what
It is interesting because like there is, it's called the Lightning Network, but it isn't a network. There is no persistent network-wide state to look at. It's not like looking at Bitcoin's blockchain or its its state or its UTXO set or its historical archive of transactions where we have this great deep data-rich ledger to mine for information, right? Like it's an overlapping web of bilateral channels. So like you can't really get good information about the state of the overall web of network unless you have a highly connected node yourself. Like
yes.
So and there was another thing, you guys had been taking down some of your channel capacity. This may have been a few months ago, I forget, but I remember you watching and people say, "Oh my gosh, like maybe Lightning's not like doing well if River doesn't need this, taking 50 BTC out of their channel periodically or something, their channels." But you said there was a different reason for that.
So yeah, I think a lot of people have some misconceptions around Lightning. They think that having more Bitcoin on your Lightning node is inherently better. But that's really not the case. What we've done at River is done a lot to optimize how much Bitcoin we actually need to put on a Lightning node to process the same amount of transactions. And so when we were taking Bitcoin off our Lightning node, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, the Lightning network is shrinking; it's getting smaller," because that's really the only publicly available metric.
It
is how much Bitcoin is like in the Lightning.
Right, because channel opens and closes, total deposits in each channel. Those are on-chain L1 transactions, so that we can see.
Exactly, and I think that a lot of people in the industry they're trying to map the concept of like TVL or TLV.
Yeah, TVL, total value locked. I mean, I've literally produced this chart as pretty much the only quantitative thing I can provide as an outside observer to show we can count the number of currently open channels, we can show channel opens and closes, and we can see the amount of Bitcoin currently inside open channels. That's all we have.
Yeah, and now that doesn't include private channels.
Of course not.
No. But the most interesting information isn't publicly on the blockchain. It's the transaction data.
Right.
And so that's where and so actually to get that we use our own data, of course, but then we also will partner with other people who will share their data with us.
And you guys all sort of can maybe share together and create. It's really interesting. It's got very frontier space too. The managing of where to put liquidity too, right? Do you guys you have like different nodes? It's not, or is it one big node, or I don't know how that.
So we have really two main nodes.
Yeah.
And that's really the core of it. Two, just to if we're doing maintenance on one, we can stay up and process transactions and switch over to using the other one. But
I guess in terms of channels too, right? So like if you see a lot of, let's say you're getting a lot of flow from this one channel that you're some partner that you're connected to, you got to move liquidity around, right? Pretty actively. Is that?
Yeah, we have automation around a lot of that stuff. We have, we have this concept of channels that we always need to maintain some sort of like inbound or balance, and some where it's just okay to sort of let it deplete. Not all channels are created equal.
Right.
Not all peers are created equal.
Right.
I think something that is maybe interesting to people who aren't really plugged into Lightning is the Lightning network is very heterogeneous, and so and there's a lot of human connections, just like banking, right? So it's like, oh, this big node over here, payments aren't going through. Realistically, it's maybe some human issue that happened, like, oh, they changed their IP address or they had a network issue, and so we just like ping them and go, hey guys,
you may know them, right? I mean,
the biggest ones right?
Yeah.
Because like the distribution of nodes and sort of importance is like a small number of nodes are the most important.
Yeah.
And so you typically know who those people are.
Is that like a excuse me? Is that like a decentralization question in your mind? Like, what if the Lightning network ends up really being like 5 companies?
I think it's just like how it inherently is going to work. I'm not too concerned about it because like what matters is that you can run your own, that you can.
Sure.
You don't have to use that node.
Right.
And the Lightning network is still usable if you do want to run your own node. That said, I think what's happening in Lightning is I think that people are starting to realize that self-custody Lightning for the consumer is a really hard problem. And I think we're going to see it doesn't fix scaling for Bitcoin. Lightning is a great connector for custodial systems, and that's really where I think it has the most potential today.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that with sort of the big exchanges adding it. It's a great way to move Bitcoin between exchanges. It's a great way to connect other potential scaling solutions like eCash mints and things like this. So I think what we'll see Lightning becoming is like this glue for other scaling solutions.
That's really interesting. I've heard of even this may be a good segue here a little bit too to talk about other scaling solutions, because I've actually heard about, I think it was Botanix, they were saying that they probably are going to be using Lightning as their bridge between their spider chains and the L1, because this is a huge question in scaling is, well, if you're building an off-chain system, any type of system, a side chain, a merged mine blockchain, a roll-up, whatever it is, even Lightning, how does it get between the L1 and the L2 in a way that is trustless, right? Or trust minimized, or however you want to say it, like safe, right? Otherwise, you don't want to be custodial. Then why not just like send it to River or to Coinbase for that matter, right? For it to actually be a decentralized system. Mm-hmm. Building these bridges is tough. Do you have any opinion on the emergence of these new L2s? A lot of them roll-ups.
Yeah. So I think that they're very interesting. I think that there's going to be, like as cryptography advances and as people figure out sort of how to peg into Bitcoin, there will be continued attention on this tech. I mean, if you go back to the founding of Blockstream, even in 2013, sort of like the holy grail was to have all of these different chains, right? Where you could peg in and out, and you had this network of chains. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe now is the time where that is actually going to happen. Yeah. I don't know for sure. I think the question, though, for me has always been, well, what happens on the chains? And there's really kind of a few buckets of things. Like, well, you could just move Bitcoin better, right? But Bitcoin doesn't really have product market fit today as a medium of exchange, like generally. It could be sort of like decentralized finance applications with Bitcoin as the base, as sort of like the base currency, Bitcoin denominated DeFi, and then that just reduces to a DeFi sort of product market fit question,
right?
And why is it better to do on that L2 versus Solana versus Ethereum? Like what and I think that gets down to the specific task you're trying to accomplish financially.
Yep.
And so I think it's a we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's fair to look at the use cases like in the application level as one incredibly important part. I mean, I've been a long beating this drum of like stop doing infrastructure, like how many new blockchains and new and don't get me wrong, there's still something to be done, but like where are the killer apps, right? Like show me the killer apps. That's really what is going to drive this entire industry forward, is something to actually do with this stuff. I think store of value for Bitcoin is a killer app, but I think that's pretty much solved. For Bitcoin's got product market fit for that. Mm-hmm. I think when you go out, it starts to say like even DeFi as an example, like it's very interesting and useful to people with on-chain wealth. I don't hear anyone on Wall Street wishing that they could do their stocks in an AMM instead of at the New York Stock Exchange. So it's not really penetrating into big time finance yet. It's more like, well, a bunch of these people have wealth that is like on ETH or in tokens or in Bitcoin or whatever, and traditional finance doesn't service that. So they'll do it here. Would you guys add, like, what would the criteria be? You offer Lightning connectivity, obviously, as we talked about. What would be the criteria in your mind before you would, add support for, say, like one of these? My team says they think there's 65 roll-ups being built right now.
Yeah, yeah. Number one, of course, it would be there's a compelling thing that our clients want.
Yeah.
Right. So does it allow our clients to do valuable things with their Bitcoin that we think are safe enough to fit under sort of the River brand and umbrella? And so, is there a future where you can, in a very safe and trustless way, borrow against your Bitcoin on a Bitcoin L2 or safely earn yield on your Bitcoin? Maybe. If that future happens, that I think would certainly be interesting to our clients. I don't think it's there yet. But we'll always be paying attention to it, of course. So yeah, I'm glad people are working on new stuff.
It's pretty exciting, I will say. I mean, to me, I'm open for basically anything as long as it doesn't like destroy Bitcoin's core features and properties, right? I mean, I think that's what we like about the layered approach in general, right? Is that one thing I wonder about, though, is these systems, many of them have a significant amount of data to post in order to operate as a roll-up. There's not that much block space, right, in Bitcoin. So it could, 65, I can tell you for sure, will not survive. There isn't enough block space for them, right? There might not even be enough for like 5. And it's going to be expensive. I mean, this is what the debate in the Ethereum world is. Well, it was expensive to post to ETH, so people built Celestia, which is literally for data availability only. It's a whole blockchain just for posting your fraud proofs and whatnot. And your so anyway, that's going to be an interesting question, I think, as well, as like who can actually afford to run a roll up on Bitcoin or. But to me, yeah, I think as long as it doesn't break Bitcoin, it's the same thing. I was asking, and maybe I didn't say this before, but I asked miners what they think about ordinals, right? What do you think about ordinals? Do you have any cares one way or another?
I mean, I see it sort of in the same vein as I see a lot of the DeFi things that have happened, NFT things. People ascribe value to fun, memeable collectibles on chain. Yeah. And Casey, who I really admire, he's an extremely intelligent guy, came up with this ordinal concept, which is very clever. Yeah, very clever. So I think it's a natural thing to happen. And so it's not something like when we think about it, it's just from our business perspective, it's very different than what we want to offer to our clients. We're a financial institution focused on Bitcoin as this sound money. We want to be sort of the safest, most trusted Bitcoin brand in the world. Ordinals are more like art. It's more like a collectible thing.
And Casey is a fan of digital art, separate from NFTs and Bitcoin and any of that. Yeah, exactly.
And so Casey's big in that world. He loves that stuff. He deeply understands art. That's just not what we do. It's not
that makes sense.
Like that, Yeah. So I actually view it as like a very different thing. It's great. It's great for miners.
Right.
When fees are pumping, it's a good test of sort of Bitcoin's infrastructure. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that's fine. To me, it's also like, I mean, if it did jeopardize Bitcoin, I think it's very reasonable to be concerned about that. I don't see it jeopardizing it at all, despite the claims that some big critics have made. Let's talk about Bitcoin development. You ran SF BitDevs for a long time. There have been a couple interesting things that I've seen. One of them was the addition of new people to maintain this BIP repository, right? Which is really just a repo that has information on proposals, right? It's not any. Is it formal or anything, or does this? Do you think what do you think the impact is of having, I think now 5 new maintainers on there?
Well, I think the BIP process is somewhat seen as, if you want something to happen, there needs to be a BIP. If you want something material to happen in Bitcoin, to the standards in the Bitcoin ecosystem, a lot of BIPs aren't consensus changes. Maybe it's a new way to, a new data format for transactions, or a new, way to, new wallet standards, things like this. And so I think that, I don't know. I actually don't know who the full list of new maintainers for this repo are, but
yeah, I forget who everyone is, but I know Merch is one. I had him on this podcast shortly after he was added. So, but yeah, I think they're all reasonable. This was discussed in the Bitcoin mailing list at some point, and then everybody was added. Does it? So do you need? I guess, do you need a BIP to have something added? I mean, plenty of changes happen to Bitcoin Core that don't have BIPs, right? It's sort of, what is the idea behind the formality of this BIP process, do you think?
There aren't many changes that happen to Bitcoin Core where there's like a new functionality.
Yeah, they're not material. Yeah, not
right.
That material.
There's a lot of maintenance, testing, things like that don't have BIPs.
Yeah.
But anything where it's like, for example, Miniscript, or Taproot, or SegWit, or silent payments, or like any proposed new opcode or anything like that, someone has to write a spec for it. Someone needs to say, here's what I want to do.
Like, here's what the thing is.
The BIP is just basically the format for how to write a specification to describe what the change you want to make.
Right.
And so that's really all it is.
Yeah.
And so it by no means it's happening.
Yeah, so there isn't really a process, though, except for here's a template. you should write your idea in this template.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's just like a tracker of ideas.
What is the process, the quote unquote process for making a change to Bitcoin?
And yeah, it's very there is no official process. At the end of the day, let's say you want to make a change to Bitcoin consensus, right? Like the biggest type of change you could
So we want to
possibly
increase
make.
the block size or something.
Yeah,
Or
let's say-
decrease it for that matter.
Yeah, let's say you wanted to decrease the block size to 100 megabytes.
Yeah.
All right, what would you need to do?
Yeah.
Well, you would need to write the code to do that. For something like that, that's a relatively easy change. But so you need to write the code, but that's actually like the easiest part
Right.
out of everything. Actually, for any change proposed to Bitcoin, writing the code is often the easiest part. What needs to happen once that's done, and you typically you would propose a BIP too, which is also relatively easy. But what needs to happen after that is you need to convince the existing core maintainers and developers to merge it to Bitcoin Core and kickstart a process to convince miners and anyone running Bitcoin nodes to run this version of Bitcoin Core. That's a lot. That's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Right. Because the default is don't change it.
Right.
Right. It's a almost $1 trillion network. We're not here to experiment anymore. This is a very conservatively run project. Now, what you could do is you could try and go around that. You could fork Bitcoin Core, make the change yourself, and call it, Bitcoin Core 2.0, or and better Bitcoin. And then you could try to convince the network to run your version of the software. You could try cutting out the devs and go straight to miners, straight to Coinbase, straight to River, straight to Kraken, and say, run this version of Bitcoin. We should change get everyone to agree this is the new sort of
This is
consensus.
Bitcoin.
This is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So, good luck with that. So it's really this murky sort of human political process with lots of different dynamics and forces that really mean it's like relatively hard to make any changes because of this.
Yeah, you really have to propose something and then like become a campaigner for it and have convinced the community, the devs in the beginning, and the people that just ack or knack stuff. Like, explain this. It's another thing. Like when I see a proposal or something, a pull request or something, and I just see a bunch of people either ack or knack it, like, what does that mean?
Ack means acknowledge,
Yeah.
and knack means not acknowledge or no, or like basically I don't agree with this change.
Yeah, but what if there's like a bunch of people that ack? Like, what's the threshold for then committing it or not?
Well, there is a like threshold. I don't know what the number is, but there's a review process for a pull request into core. Now, most pull requests into core, like 99.9% of them, are not changing consensus.
No.
Right?
They're like documentation or like minor things to the software. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they're not always minor, like because some changes aren't consensus changes, but can also cause big network issues. Like let's say that the P2P code for like how nodes communicate gets
True.
changed, and there's a bug.
Yeah.
Well, that could take down the whole network.
Yeah,
Even though
that's
it's not
true.
a consensus change.
That's true.
So there is some very touchy stuff. But I think like high level, I think a lot of people get sort of like frustrated by this concept, but really it's politics. And people don't like that word, politics. But what is politics really? Politics is how humans socially coordinate to create rules.
Yep.
That's what politics is. And so this is just that.
It is,
It
right?
is just politics.
It's funny because and by the way, people can get frustrated with this. I get it. There's plenty of things. I think the only one that at this point years ago said I was supportive of CTV. Otherwise, I mean, in general, I'd like something with covenants because I like the vaulted custody use case enough that, like, to me, I also think it's whatever. We're not going into specific ones necessarily, but that's the one that I've specifically said I think is good and is conservative as well. But there's you gotta carry that flame. There is no process. Unlike and that's beautiful. That can be frustrating, but it's also what free and open source software development really is. Like, and there can be powers of centers of gravity, and there are. But I would say Bitcoin development is somewhat chaotic, and that's a positive. It's not true for most other crypto projects.
Correct.
There's no Bitcoin Foundation. Well, I mean,
They tried it.
yeah,
Someone
I know.
tried it.
There's
and
no
it failed
Bitcoin.
miserably, thankfully.
Yeah. So there's no there was no ICO or pre-sale. So there's no group that took 15% of the supply and uses that to fund development. But this also makes it hard for developers, right? They don't have, funding. I think Satoshi once said, he hoped or thought that maybe the companies that build on Bitcoin, like a River or a Galaxy, would pay for development since they get economic and commercial benefit from the network. But what are your thoughts on that, on funding development?
It's a challenging issue. Luckily, a lot of early Bitcoiners and businesses have started stepping up to provide funding for developers. And what we're seeing emerge is effectively sort of different clusters of developers, and some just lone wolf developers who get grants and funded by individual companies. But for example, there's Chaincode that Alex Morkos and Suhas are fund just from their own wealth, and have done so much. By the way, Alex and Suhas are extremely selfless in the sense of how much they've contributed to core development, how much they've helped fight sort of the Craig Wright lawsuits and all of this. I mean, it's incredible. So you have some of these benefactors in Bitcoin that have really been bulwarks of sort of providing resources for development and other things. Jack Dorsey, Wences Cesaris, John Pfeffer, all these guys that have really stepped up and helped fund organizations like Chaincode, like Brink, and given individual grants to a lot of developers. So there's no, it's very decentralized, like everything in Bitcoin. There's not like, this is the main Bitcoin developer organization.
Right.
But the organizations are maturing a bit and getting better at saying sort of what's the right way to make this a bit more sort of sustainable and permanent? How do we find the right Bitcoin talent? How do we keep Bitcoin developers working on Bitcoin? Because if you want the best developers, these people can go also earn a bunch of money at Google.
Right.
And sure, maybe you'll get like a smart 25-year-old working on Bitcoin, but when he gets married and starts having kids, how do you make sure that he feels like he's doing right by his family working on Bitcoin as well, and has the benefits and the resources that he would at a normal job?
And you want to keep these developers because, training a new developer, right? And that's a big part of what some of these organizations do, right? I know Chaincode is one. They had a whole program for training new Bitcoin developers, but you'd rather not. You don't want a high turnover, not really. You want plenty of people coming in,
yes,
but you need people who've been building it for a long time to offer that, wisdom.
Absolutely. It's an extremely complex code base. There's a lot of legacy things to understand to the new person coming in. It can take years to get up and running to just make material changes.
Yeah.
And so, it's just the nature of the project. And, you can look at other open source projects. Like there was some conversations recently about SQLite. It's this database software that's basically in every device in the world. And it's run by 3 guys. Yeah. They don't take outside contributions. It's one of the best tested pieces of software in the world. For the line of code they have in SQLite, there's 30 lines of tests.
Wow.
That's another way of running a project, right? Which is just like this sort of small group of.
There was something too. I can't remember which one, but it was. This was a story I read in the news 2 or 3 years ago, and it was like some also widely used piece of open source software was actually maintained by one dude. There's only one person.
It was probably curl.
Yeah,
it was probably curl.
And there was some issue downstream, not with it. But they were people were like, oh my God, the entire world's technology is built uses this one dependency that is literally maintained by one gentleman in the UK.
Yes. That's a lot of most of the world's software is there are these just libraries that
you just assume
this one guy has selflessly maintained for 10 years, and we just hope it's all okay.
I know. That is beautiful though. Yeah. That is decentralization also. I would say lastly before what gets you super excited about Bitcoin these days? You guys have built you also had hosted machines at one point. You've pretty much offered at one point or another, and even now, every sort of Bitcoin native only product that I'm aware of, they've all been. Do you have anything big coming down that you are ready to announce right now? Or if not, what gets you really excited about River in the future?
Nothing ready to announce right now, but we do have a pretty exciting thing that we're planning to announce in the coming months. But I'm excited. It maybe sounds strange, but I get more and more excited every day about Bitcoin as a store of value and how can River continue to position itself at the center of your life and helping you grow, manage, and build your wealth. We're focused on that, being that hub for your saving. And like you said, Bitcoin has very clear product market fit as the store of value. And I actually just think we're just getting started with that.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that in our growth. We're seeing that in the types of clients coming in. One thing that's been interesting is seeing how many businesses are starting to put Bitcoin in their treasuries.
Yeah, like you mean like operating companies.
Operating companies like hot dog stands.
Yeah, literally.
Like cleaning businesses. Like
Wow.
It's fascinating because there's a huge wave left to happen, I think. Whereas when somebody gets orange pilled, it's a personal journey. But if that person's an entrepreneur or a founder or runs a company, their next sort of step goes, well, what about for my company? And so that sort of like that's slowly starting to happen, and we're seeing it accelerate. And I think that's a very interesting trend.
Wow. So not just MicroStrategy, you think, and not just what's that great tahinis?
Tahinis. It's not just tahinis.
That's what I mean.
There's a lot of other restaurants and dental offices and construction companies.
Wow.
Construction guys, real estate guys, they love Bitcoin.
Yeah. They get scarcity.
Yeah, they get it.
One of the things that blew my mind was when I found out that Michael Saylor had also been stacking domains since like the beginning too. This guy loves digital scarcity.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming. And check out river.com, maybe the best domain in Bitcoin.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this was great. That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thanks to our guest, Alex Leishman from river.com, and our friend Bimneta Bibi from Galaxy Trading, as always. Everyone have a safe and happy weekend, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.